Welcome to day 2 of week 10 of the RPS 8th grade math SOL lessons, where we're dealing with slope and y-intercept connections. This is all in correlation with SOL 8.16, where the students will make connections between slope and y-intercept. And going over yesterday's independent practice and homework solutions, this is the actual pictorial representations of the homework set. For number 1, the first thing you needed to do was to plot your y-intercept, which we see from the equation is -1. So you'd plot a point at -1, and then using your slope of 3/4, you will perform rise over run to plot at least 2 additional points. So for us, we have 5 total points, which means we have plotted 4 additional points. So for the points that are going to your right, you were to go up 3 and over to the right 4. And then for the ones that are below the -1, meaning they're going down to the left, you would have done the same thing where you're going down 3 and over to the left 4, because we know 2 negatives make a positive. So you'll still have the same exact slope. So the slope is 3/4 and your y-intercept is -1. For graph number 2, you had to start off at your y-intercept, which is +2 on the y-axis. And then we notice that we have a whole number for our slope, which is -3. We actually have to put that over 1 so that we can have a rise over run. So you would end up going down 3 and then to the right 1 to plot your slope. Or either the opposite is you'll go up 3 and then to the left 1. So either way, as long as you have at least 3 other points to make your straight line, your line should look very, very similar, if not almost identical to the one that you see here, depending on the spacing of your graph boxes. For today's objective, it states that I can graph a linear function given an equation written in slope-intercept form y equals mx plus b. Materials needed are notebook or lined paper, graph paper, a ruler, and a pencil. Important vocabulary terms that we will be going over or using this week are as follows: linear function, slope, slope-intercept form of a linear equation, and y-intercept. Please look at the following instructional notes. Please familiarize yourself with them. We'll be using them throughout the activities that you'll be working on today. Once you are ready, please continue on with the slideshow so that we can use these for independent practice. Here is example number 1. Y equals 4/5 x plus 5. We ask that you graph the following on a coordinate plane. Remember to plot the y-intercept first on the y-axis and then use the slope to plot 2 additional points. When you are done plotting your points, we'd ask that you resume the slideshow so that we can go over the solution set with you.
Let's look at the solution to example 1. In example 1, we need to graph the linear function using the slope and the y-intercept. But first, we need to identify the slope and the y-intercept from the given equation. This equation is written in slope-intercept form, and so it's easy for us to identify the slope and the y-intercept. The slope is the coefficient of the x term, so the y-intercept is here. So we have a slope of 4/5 and a y-intercept of 5. So now I'm going to plot my points. Remember, using your slope and your y-intercept, I'm going to plot my y-intercept first on the y-axis. So my y-intercept is 5. I'm going to start here at the origin, and then I'm going to go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and plot my point. Now from that point, I'm going to use my slope to plot my second and third point. Remember, we want to plot 3 points. So when I look here at my slope, remember my numerator tells me to go either up or down. My denominator tells me to go either right or left. Because my numerator is positive, I'm going to go up 4. And my denominator is positive, so I'm going to go right 5. So I'm going to start here at my y-intercept, and from this point, I'm going to go up 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and right 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and plot my second point. Now, because I want 3 points, I'm going to start here and I'm going to use that same process. I'm going to go up 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and write 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and plot my third point. Notice that my points are in a linear formation. Remember, they should already look like a line before you actually connect them. Then I'm going to take my ruler and connect those 3 points to graph my line. Remember to put your arrows on the end because that means it goes on forever, endlessly in those directions. And that is how you would graph a linear function using the slope and the y-intercept.
For example number 2, you are given the equation y equals negative 5/2 x minus 1. You're asked to graph this on the coordinate grid. Remember to first plot the y-intercept on the y-axis, and the second step is to use the slope to plot 2 additional points. Please pause the slideshow at this time to note your answers on your coordinate grid paper. Resume the slideshow when you're ready to go over the answers.
Let's look at the solution to example 2. In example 2, we need to graph the linear function using the slope and the y-intercept. But first, we need to identify the slope and the y-intercept in the given equation. So here our slope is negative 5/2. Remember that your slope is always going to be the coefficient of your x term. And your y-intercept is here. Now remember, my y-intercept is going to be negative in this particular example because it says -1. If it was +1, it would be positive. So our steps here are the same as they were in our previous examples, as well as yesterday's lesson. We're going to plot our y-intercept first on our y-axis. So here our y-intercept is -1. So I'm going to plot that on our y-axis. Then I want to use my slope to plot my next 2 points. Remember, we want to use 3 points. So I'm going to look at my slope, and my numerator says -5, which means I'm going to go down 5, and then my denominator says +2, which means I'm going to go right. Remember that your numerator tells you up or down, your denominator tells you left or right. So I'm going to start at my y-intercept, and I'm going to go down 5, right 2, and plot a point. So starting here, I'm going to go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right 1, 2, and plot my point. I want a third point, so I'm going to continue with that same process from here, going down 5, right 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2. Remember, it should be like you're creating steps. So now that I have my 3 points plotted, notice they're already in a linear formation. I just want to take my straight edge and connect them. And remember to put your arrows on the end. That indicates that your line's going to keep going in those directions endlessly. And that's how you would graph a linear function using the slope, the y-intercept.
For example number 3, you are given the equation y equals -2x plus 2. Please graph this following equation on the coordinate grid. Remember to plot your y-intercept on the y-axis and then use the slope to plot 2 additional points. Please pause the slideshow at this time to note your answers on your grid paper and resume the slideshow when you are ready to go over the answer.
Let's look at the solution for example 3. In example 3, we want to graph the linear function using the slope and the y-intercept. The first thing I want to do is identify the slope and the y-intercept from the given equation. Remember that your slope is the coefficient of your x term. And here's our y-intercept. So my slope is -2, my y-intercept is +2. Now, remember we discussed that your slope needs to be written in fraction form because you need rise and run. So here we only have an integer number, so I must change this to a fraction. And the way you change your integer or your whole numbers to fractions is just by placing them over 1. So I'm going to make this -2 over 1. That way I have rise and run. Remember, the numerator is your rise, the denominator is your run. So I'm going to start by plotting my y-intercept on my y-axis. My y-intercept is 2, so I'm going to plot 1, 2 on my y-axis. Now, from your y-intercept, I'm going to use my slope to go either up or down, right or left. Remember, my numerator tells me up or down. My denominator tells me right or left. So because my numerator is negative, that means I'm going to go down. And my denominator is positive, meaning I'm going to go right. So starting at my y-intercept, I'm going to go down 2, right 1, and plot a point. Now I'm going to do this process twice because I want 2 additional points. I want a total of 3 points. So I'm going to start here and I'm going to go down 1, 2, right 1, plot a point. Going to continue with that process to plot one more, down 2, 1, 2, right 1, and plot a point. Remember, again, your points should already bank up. They should already look like they're in a straight line. We just need to connect them. If they don't, you got to figure out which one you've plotted incorrectly. So now I'm going to take my straight edge. Remember, you can be using a ruler, ID, anything that has a straight line on it to connect your points. Put your arrows on the end and you're done. So this is how you would plot a linear function using slope and y-intercept from an equation.
Next, you will find your practice and homework problems for today. We'd ask that you will please pause the slideshow at this time and respond to each one of the questions. Number 5 says, which linear equation best represents the graph below? And then for number 6, it says, which linear equation represents the same relationship shown in the graph below? We'd ask you to please take a moment to pause the slideshow, find and denote your answer for each one of the questions, and then resume after you have done so. Now that you have completed your homework, we'd ask that you please log into Clever and complete at least one Dreambox lesson. Remember, if you have the opportunity and the time to complete more, we'd ask that you please do so. But at this time, we'd ask that you please log into your Clever account and complete at least one Dreambox activity. We will go over your homework at the top of tomorrow's session. Thanks for joining us today. Looking forward to working with you on tomorrow.